During the darkest days of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, Freddie Scappaticci was leading a double life.
He was a senior member of the IRA. His job was to find and interrogate informers.
But at the same time, he was a secret British agent, possibly its most prized informant.
How did the British military allow an agent to torture and kill informers, all while he himself was an informer?
We're previewing Stakeknife, the second series of Cover on BBC Sounds.
That's on this episode of So Much Crime.
So little time. Do you know what Ski Week is?
For anyone listening in Ireland, it's basically a midterm break for fancy people who go skiing on their midterm break.
I will say I have never gone skiing on Ski Week. I actually have never gone skiing, period. But if I had...
That's shocking.
Yeah. If you're up there in the ski lodge, or let's say you're on the ski lift, just sitting there. It seems like I've been on a ski lift multiple times, and it's a lot of sitting around waiting. You know what you should do?
What should you do, Jeff?
You should get out your phone. Go to patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time. You can listen to early release episodes. In fact, you could listen to the recap of this preview before you get to the top of the mountain. Then while you're skiing, listen to bonus content, outtakes, watch out for trees, but know that you're having that good feeling of supporting the show. So that's patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time.
Safe skiing, everybody.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Dee. And in this episode, we'll introduce you to Stakeknife. This is the second series of Cover from BBC Sounds.
If you haven't listened to Stakeknife, that's great. This is one of our preview episodes.
We're only going to introduce you to the podcast and cover parts of the very first episode. There will be no spoilers for what's to come.
You'll also find a link to Stakeknife in our show notes.
In our next episode, we'll discuss the whole series. But right now, we just want to decide if this is a crime that's worth your time.
All right, so Dee, before we get to this, I know this is a story about the Troubles, which lasted from the 60s to the 90s. But our story here actually starts a little bit later. So the podcast Stakeknife begins on May 14th, 2003. So before we get into our discussion about Stakeknife, let's hop in the time machine.
Okay. How confident, Jeff, are you in the movies that came out in 2003?
I'm going to say I'm about a 9 on a 10 scale.
Okay. So my game is to give you quotes and for you to try and match them to movies that came out in 2003.
Wait, actually, now that I think about it, May 2003. I'm trying to think where I was. I was about to get married.
Well, then you were doing nothing other than watching movies because you couldn't be going out, saving up all your money to pay for the wedding. Do you need me to name the movies?
Let's try it without you naming the movies first.
Oh.
Let's play on hard version.
Dun, dun. Okay. This was number 12 on the IMDb's rating of movies at the time. I will tell you this is an R-rated movie, if that gives you any hints.
Okay.
I don't
That's
really
a
know
helpful
what
hint.
R-rated means, but I think it means like only older people can go and see it.
Yeah, 17 plus, I think.
Okay. Don't ever try to judge me, dude. You don't know what the fuck I've been through. At the bleep, I should have said. But I know something about you. That's one quote. This guy keeps screaming. He's paranoid. Quick, someone get his ass another steroid.
Are you just randomly searching quotes from the movie on IMDb?
Yeah, basically.
These aren't necessarily like the known quotes from these movies.
Well, it says quotes. So presumably they're not just pulling all of them. I do live in a trailer with my mom. My boy future is an Uncle Tom. I do got a dumb friend named Cheddar Bob. God, who shoots himself in the leg with his own gun. I did get jumped by all 6 of you chumps. And Wink did bleep my girl. I'm still standing here screaming bleep the free world.
I really was focused on my wedding.
Palms are sweaty. Be sweet. Arms are heady.
Is this the
Vomit
Eminem
on a
movie?
sweater already. Yeah.
8 Mile?
Yeah. It's a great movie.
Okay.
I guarantee you'll get this one. I guarantee you have to get this one. Okay.
All right.
I promised I'd never let anything to happen to him. That's a funny thing to promise. What? Well, you can't never let anything to happen to him. There's nothing would ever, then nothing would ever happen to him. Not much fun for little Harpo. I am a nice shark, not a mindless eating machine.
Just
If I am
Finding
to
Nemo.
change this image, yeah, I knew you
Yeah,
get it.
there it is. Okay. All right. I did see that movie.
You know, Jeff, I know we're going to be jumping into some like pretty serious stuff here with this podcast and with the next, with this podcast, Stakeknife. So one of the more artistic and interesting elements that have come out of the Troubles has been a lot of songs have been written and produced that are really good, and also a lot of movies and TV shows have been produced that are really good and have stood the test of time. Really good way of the Irish telling their story about the Troubles from lots of different perspectives. Why not do a time machine but focus it more on the theme of these podcasts? So like the Troubles time machine, maybe?
Yeah. All right. Let's do it.
We start with music.
Sure. So I went and did some research on what are the best or most notable songs about the Troubles or from that time or from people in Northern Ireland. And people had a lot of different opinions about this. I mean, it's a long time period. There's a lot of songs. So I'm just going to say I went to a bunch of different websites that had like Ireland or Irish in the name. And then I also went to Reddit, and that led me astray. There were some real not appropriate songs there. But my main takeaway was there's only a couple of songs that appeared on a lot of these lists. But there were some bands that had, like, I guess a lot of their songs appeared. So it was different songs by the same band. Well, I pulled several. We can stop at any time. They start easy and they get hard. So I started with two that I knew, and then I have a couple I don't know.
I feel like there's more pressure on me for this one than there ever is usually, because if I don't know them, I feel like I'm,
letting down your people.
I'm no longer Irish, maybe.
Yeah. I think they might revoke your citizenship.
Oh dear, don't leave me here. Fucking
All right.
shit show in this place.
Again, I'm starting easy with songs that I know, so that's a clue. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. First one. Another head hangs lowly. Child is slowly taken. And the violence caused such silence.
It's the Foggy Jew?
Mm-mm.
No, this is Down the glen one Easter morn. Is that the next line?
Mm-mm. Who are we mistaken? But you see, it's not me.
Oh. It's not my family in your head. That's Zombie.
Zombie, Cranberries. Yeah. All right.
That's their tanks. Gosh, that's poor. I'm sorry, Ireland.
It took you that long to get the Cranberries.
Yeah.
Okay. This next one. So if you were to ask me, it's like without looking it up, songs about the Troubles, I would have said Zombie by the Cranberries, and I would have said this other one. I'm hoping you get this one very quickly. I can't believe the news today. I can't close my eyes and make it go away.
Is this you too?
Yeah. It's the song.
Bloody Sunday.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Those are the easy ones.
Sunday, Bloody Sunday. That's the tune.
And then I got one or two more that you might know. I don't know. Okay. I could be a soldier, go out there and fight to save this land. Be a people's soldier, paramilitary gun in hand. I won't be a soldier. I won't take no orders from no one. Stuff their fucking armies. Killing isn't my idea of fun.
I have no guesses.
Stiff Little Fingers. Wasted Life. It's a punk band. From Belfast, I think. They had a bunch of songs that came up on these lists. Okay, one more.
Mm-hmm.
Through the last 6 years, I've lived through terror. And in the darkened streets, the pain. How I long to find some solace. In my mind, I curse the strain. That's the verse. And the chorus says, then I'll cut out the title. So farewell, you blank, blank, blank.
Black and Tans. It's like, Jeff, you're not supposed to sing this one. It's also not technically about the Troubles. Well,
You're not getting this one. I can read the next verse. There were 6 men in Birmingham. In Guildford, there's 4 that were picked up and tortured and framed by the law. And the 5th got promotion, but they're still doing time for being Irish in the wrong place and at the wrong time.
I know this song.
In Ireland, they'll put you away in the maze. In England, they'll keep you for 7 long days. God help you if you're ever caught on these shores. The coppers need someone, and they walk through that door.
I don't know.
It's the Pogues. Streets of Sorrow.
Pogues are great.
Yeah.
Have you listened to the Pogues before? Presumably you knew Shane MacGowan and stuff, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew the Pogues.
I'm feeling like I did it. That was a poor display on my part. But anyway.
I mean, you got U2 and the Cranberries.
The only ones the American knew, I also knew. Okay. I don't know how much you're going to know about the movies. One movie came out in 1993. All right. And I'm thinking that there's no chance you'll know the movie. I'm going to give you a lot of detail to see if you do know it. Okay. So Daniel Day-Lewis stars in it. And Jim Sheridan is the director. You're familiar with these people?
Yes.
Okay. An Irish man's coerced confession to an IRA bombing he did not commit results in the imprisonment of his father as well.
Is this in the name of the father?
You got it. I didn't think you'd know that movie.
I haven't seen it.
Emma Thompson.
But I always wanted to. Yeah.
Oh, put it on your list.
It's on my list.
It's not for like, oh, let's watch something nice tonight, but it's a great movie.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen most of Daniel Day-Lewis's movies, but not that one.
Do you know I only saw My Left Foot recently? Have you seen that movie?
No, that's the other one I haven't seen.
Oh my God, it's actually excellent. Paul made me watch it recently because he was a little bit disgusted in me that I'd never seen it.
No, I should watch that. But I've seen, because he hasn't done that many movies. Like, Last of the Mohicans, There Will Be Blood, Phantom Thread. I didn't see Gangs of New York.
I have one more movie and then I have a TV show.
Okay.
This movie came out in 2021. Kenneth Branagh was the director.
Oh, yeah. It's in black and white. It's is it called Belfast?
Yes, it is. Have you seen it?
Yeah. No.
That's good.
It's gonna be a theme of this. I know of it. Want to see it.
So you don't support the Irish arts at all, is what I'm hearing.
I support an Irish podcast.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Is this an Irish podcast?
It's half Irish.
According to some people, it's your podcast. It's not our podcast. So, all right. The last one is a TV show. You'll definitely get this. It's a group of teenage girls during the Troubles based in Derry.
Derry Girls, yeah. Yeah. I've actually seen this. I've seen a lot of episodes of this. I haven't seen all of them, but most of them. It's a great show. Such a good show. Mm. Oh, I should watch the rest of it.
Mm-hmm. You should. Anyway, that was a really long time machine. Like, how long are we in now? Before we jump into today's episode, we want to just give you a little bit of an overview about the podcast. So, this podcast was released in the winter of 2024-2025. Its host is Mark Horgan. There are 10 episodes, all in around 45 minutes in length. But what is the story?
If people are wondering who Mark Horgan is, who's Mark Horgan, Dee?
Mark Horgan is actually Sharon Horgan's brother, which is very interesting. He's also...
If people don't know who Sharon...
If people don't know who Sharon Horgan is, like, turn us off immediately. No, joking. Don't do that. He is... So Sharon Horgan helped write and starred in Bad Sisters and also Catastrophe with Rob Delaney, and she's amazing. There's lots of things she's done and she's written, and she's an absolute superstar. So Mark Horgan is actually Sharon Horgan's brother. Mark Horgan is also one of the hosts of Second Captains, which is a popular sports show in Ireland, which is interesting. There you go. Based in Dublin.
Okay.
So that's who Mark Horgan is. So Jeff, tell us, what's the story with this very light-hearted podcast that we're diving into?
We're going to talk about this. I'm going to try to explain what happens in this first episode. And then when we get to our discussion, I'm going to ask you some questions because I don't know that I fully understood what was happening here. But here's what I know. We start off, it's May 2003. There's this guy, Freddie Scappaticci. He is about to be outed as a double agent working for, I think he's about to be outed that he works for the British Army as an informer, but he's basically doing a preemptive press conference to say that that's not true. It's all lies. And then we cut to this woman, Sylvia Jones, who's a reporter. She had interviewed this guy years ago, but not run the interview because she found out who he really was. And so she shelved it. But then...
Well, sorry, I need to interject here. You're not doing a very good job at this. He...
Should have given you this to do.
She was there when someone was meeting an informer with... There was a couple of journalists who put out a story, and Scappaticci actually contacted them and said, you are only scratching the surface about Martin McGuinness, this guy that the story was about. I have way more information. So they met. Sylvia was put in a room with another person, listening in and waiting for calls about this meetup that was happening in the hotel car park. She didn't know that this was Scappaticci. She thought his name was Jack. And when this press conference happened, she recognized him and knew immediately who it was.
Right. Yes, what Dee said is what happened in the podcast. Okay. And then what else?
Oh, sorry. And then they have all this information that they bring to the police, the British police, and they are like, oh, basically you cannot use this. He's our most prized informer. We don't want this out. Like, don't publish the story that you're talking about because they'll know who it's come from. Say nothing to no one, basically. And they buried the story because the police, the British police, and these journalists, were they for the Daily Mail? I think it was the Daily Mail, had a really good report. So they shelved the story. But when Scappaticci came out to this press conference to deny everything, and someone else had put out a story to say Scappaticci was Stakeknife, Jones said to her contact, am I okay to publish our story now? And they said, sure, he's outed anyway. So she did.
And then he basically flees Northern Ireland and is never heard from again.
Yeah.
And
that was a hard one to recap. I was going hard on you there, and then I'm like, actually, now that I start speaking about it, it's really hard to do.
So, and I mean, let's just get into this. Like, I think it's a little bit of a complicated story, and then it's a little bit complicated in the way it's presented in this first episode. The first episode, which is called The Man Who Never Was. And I mean, anytime you're dealing with like double agents, it's got, I mean, I was thinking back to The Departed. Have you seen The Departed?
I think I may have seen The Departed like 6 or 7 times. Paul went through a phase of like absolutely adoring that movie. Leonardo DiCaprio in general, all his movies.
I mean, it's all of its terrible accents.
The Departed.
The worst accents. Yeah.
I mean, from an Irish point of view, it's probably like, oh my God, their accents are so cool.
Yeah, the Boston accents they're mistakes. Anyway.
See, this is like when Americans try to do an Irish accent, and I'm just like, no.
Well, when Americans try to do a Boston accent, it's a mistake.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about when Irish people try and do? No. My New York one is much better.
Oh. Okay. So complicated story told in a complicated way. Also, just kind of presuming you know a lot.
You think it was told in a complicated way? Do you think they overcomplicated the storytelling here?
I mean, I had a hard time following it.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was it the accents?
No, I didn't really have trouble with the accents. Because, I mean, it was also a mix of people who were Irish and British. So it wasn't...
So it's fine. I could understand the Brits. No problem.
No, I honestly didn't. I didn't find the accents difficult. I just found the storytelling hard to follow.
So the format, like the layout of the story you found wasn't linear enough?
Yeah, it jumped around in time. And I feel like because I didn't really have a frame of reference, like an anchor of like knowing who any of these people were, or other than just knowing generally about the IRA, like there wasn't a name mentioned in this podcast that I knew.
I will agree with you on that. I won't agree with you on everything now. That would make for a very boring podcast. But I will agree with you on that. I did feel like people were mentioned and I knew who they were. And immediately I was like, Jeff's not going to know this person. So there is no context given. So for example, when they're speaking about Martin McGuinness, so this story that they're speaking about is about Martin McGuinness. Martin McGuinness was a member of Sinn Féin, and he was an Irish Republican politician in Ireland. Always had a cloud of doubt over him about his involvement in the IRA. He passed away in 2017, and there was just always a lot of talk about him and his involvement there. So I knew immediately when they said Martin McGuinness who they were referring to, but obviously you had no idea.
And honestly, for our listeners who aren't familiar with the IRA in general, can we do a little bit of just clarifying of what? Let's dumb it down a little bit for a second here. We don't have to go through the whole thing. I just want just so that the words we're using make sense.
Brief overview for people who don't know. I'm not very good at being brief, so you're going to have to keep me accountable here. England invaded Ireland, took over the entire country, banned our language, etc., etc. Won't go into the details. Did their thing that they've done to many countries.
Sure.
Then in 1916, there was a rising called the Easter Rising in Ireland. And from that, 5 years later, in 1921, we managed to get the Irish Free State was signed. Basically, what happened there was Britain said, we have 32 counties in Ireland. Britain said you can have 26 counties in an Irish Free State. We are keeping 6 of the counties in Northern Ireland. They will still remain part of Britain. They'll still swear allegiance to the Queen, etc., etc. At the time, a lot of money was going in. Just to give context here, at the time, a lot of money was... The North was very economically sound with all the shipbuilding, etc., etc. They wanted to keep that because it made sense for their economy. So we got the 26 states, they got the 6. From that, basically sparked a civil war that never really died down. So from the 1960s to the 1990s-ish, we use the term like the Troubles. It was kind of closer. I thought it was the 1973-ish. But anyway, basically what it is here is like the area if we look at Belfast, where we're focused on for this, there's 2 areas in Belfast. If you can imagine, one side of a street is all Catholics and Republicans, and the other side of the street is all Protestants and Unionists. The Unionists want to stay pledging allegiance to the Queen, want to stay part of Britain, and the Republicans want all of the counties to go back and to be one entire republic together. And this is all happening. So when they're speaking about the IRA, they're speaking about the Irish Republican Army. This is basically a group of people that are bombing, torturing, killing British soldiers or British police or British informants or whatever. And really the British are doing kind of the same thing to who they deem like terrorists at the time, the IRA, who they deem like part of the IRA.
Right.
Was that quick enough?
It was.
There's a lot of history there.
So, and part of why I think the implicit drama and sensitivity around this agent Stakeknife is this guy Freddie Scappaticci. I mean, people were being tortured, murdered. There were bombings. There were like
Irish people were like he was torturing Irish people because they potentially were informers, and he was an informer himself.
Right. But I mean, the level of violence, like extreme violence on both sides, right? Mm-hmm. And that was happening. And it's included civilians, not people who, yeah. So lots of innocent people died.
And I think that was mentioned by someone throughout the podcast. Might have been Sylvia who mentioned it, like saying like, it's really hard to imagine this time where people throw out your name and say like, oh, he's an informer, I saw him, blah, blah, blah. And something as simple as like throwing someone's name out there could end up with them being killed.
Right. Yeah. I feel like this podcast expects you to sort of understand the stakes that we were dealing with and kind of how, like, the amount of sort of gravity and the level of violence and murder and torture. And that was, so I think it's important to kind of get that out there, because I have a vague sense of it, but I mean, I didn't really live through it. I don't.
And I didn't either. I lived through like my entire childhood, 4 older brothers, like my parents, like I would have heard stories about it from when I was young. I would have watched movies about it. I would have listened to songs about it. It was always spoken about. My dad, I remember the first time Paul and I went up to Belfast to visit it, was like, you cannot drive a Republic of Ireland reg, like car registration up there, because you will be targeted, because not too long ago for him, that would have been the case.
And this, as a point of reference for something I have seen, so Dairy Girls is set in the 90s, so towards the end of this period, and it's a comedy, but this is sometimes a plot point of the show, like a bombing or something. Like it comes up in that show. So, and that's, I mean, the same thing as some of these movies you're talking about, right? Like there's a lot of pop culture references aside from just U2 songs. That's my point of reference for this. Okay.
Yeah. I didn't think the plot or the storytelling was confusing, but also I'm aware that I'm coming in with a very different level of context than you have. Like subconsciously, even I know a lot more than you would.
Sure. About
this. So it's hard for me to judge. I do think they brought up like the like of Martin McGuinness, and also David Norris came up in it and he was speaking in it, and I'm like, nobody's introducing him. This is wild. He was also a politician. He was a civil rights activist, a great old man. And so I heard his voice. His voice is fairly, what's the word when you can really clearly identify someone's voice?
Distinguishable?
Yeah. He has a real distinct voice.
So what, I mean, I guess to step back from the podcast, what's your take on this? Like, how did you feel? Did you think this is something that's gonna be worth your time?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm in, like, I don't think we haven't touched on the Troubles yet during this podcast. And I think even the idea that this is a podcast obviously about crime, so much crime that has been committed by Stakeknife allegedly. But then also this like extra twist that he was the torturer and also the informer, but he was torturing the informers. Like, it's just wild. I think it's a really interesting plot. I thought the production was really good. I liked that they used the primary sources of the tapes, even though the quality wasn't good. I liked that they played it for like 30 seconds and then layered it with the actual like words so that we could hear them of what was being said. They kind of read the script of what was being said.
It's funny, we've done this enough now where I'm sometimes hoping or waiting for that, where you've got, like you want to hear you want to hear the primary sources. Sometimes they're inaudible or they are such poor quality, and you don't want someone just to basically regurgitate the whole thing. You want them just to tell you either what it said, summarize, highlight the important parts. But it's nice to have that kind of balance of a little bit of both. And I agree. I think the production was strong. I agree with that.
I have a question for you. Sylvia Jones, this journalist who had or reporter who had originally seen Scappaticci way back when, and then in 2003, after this press conference, had recognized him and asked could she run the story. She was given a green light to run the story. That kind of confirmed Scappaticci as, confirmed the story that was then out there about Scappaticci.
Right.
Do you think that was the right thing to do?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of surprised she sat on it all those years. She had a pretty explosive story from when she first did the interview. And I guess she was being respectful of her other contacts, right? Like as a journalist, you have to sometimes listen, like go against what was going to be a big splash because you have other sources.
Would it have been a big splash? Because as she said, like at that time, people were throwing out names all over the place. Like they didn't know if this Jack guy Scappaticci at the time was actually telling the truth.
I guess that's true. It's almost like him coming out and denying it and it getting out there. Like it gave her story so much more weight, right? Like that's...
Yeah, it gave her story so much more weight, but I don't know. It felt a little bit...
You didn't feel good about it?
It didn't sit right with me.
Okay, so she's sitting there. She knows she has the story. She knows has the story that basically refutes. So her reasoning was, he comes out here. He does this press conference basically saying, none of this is true. I'm not that guy. And she knows she has this interview basically saying he is that guy.
I suppose maybe what I'm trying to say is she said she contacted one of her sources and said, look, it's out there now. I have this story. Can I use it? And they said yes. And that to me doesn't feel like the right thing to do, because as much as it appears allegedly that Scappaticci was Stakeknife and was this informer who did all these terrible things, I don't like the fact that whoever gave Sylvia the green light was likely high up enough to be allowing Scappaticci to do this the whole time as well. So it's kind of like, you're done for now. Don't need you anymore.
Yeah, he's expendable at this point by 2003.
Yeah. So I don't like that. I don't like that her story coming out probably put the nail in the coffin, because people may have believed his story that this was BS.
I mean,
But when she confirmed it through like a totally different voice, like not connected really to the story that originally came out that said that he was Stakeknife, she confirmed it. She put that nail in the coffin, and I don't think that was the right thing to do.
Okay. I don't know that I disagree with that, but at the same time, there's no real good person in this story. This is a story full of bad people doing terrible things.
I think this is a story full of people who are trying to survive in a very unsurvivable atmosphere.
I shouldn't say bad people doing terrible things. There's definitely people doing terrible things, but that's fair.
There's no such thing as bad people. It's just bad decisions. That's what we say to our kids.
Okay. Well, I mean, putting cigarettes out in people's eyes is a pretty bad decision.
Yeah, well, you see, that was interesting because that was said by someone saying, like, oh, I can't believe you shook that hand. But then when he was speaking about it, he said it's not physical torture, it's mental torture. Why would he lie about it at that point?
Oh, I just presumed it starts with mental torture, but
he said everyone has their breaking point.
But he also talked about basically like you putting them in a very cold room, and he called that mental torture. That's not mental torture. That's physical torture. It's a form of physical torture.
Yeah, but it's also different to like stabbing a cigarette out in someone's eye. Like, I just think, like, I wouldn't believe that he did that necessarily. I don't know. I'm just pointing out the weak point in your argument.
Naive.
Likely.
That's what my point is, that this is a man who, from what very little I know, was either directly or indirectly involved in a lot of people being tortured and murdered for the very thing that he was doing. Yep. So, I don't know. Like, are our sympathies supposed to be with him?
No, it was just a question. Okay. I don't know. As you said, like, I don't know that there's any like victim brought forward in this story.
And I guess that's the question.
Unshockingly, with the Troubles, the victims are like not named. They're they're quietly in the background. They're mostly civilians, like.
But like, as we go into the story about the IRA and about the Troubles, like, obviously, I don't expect you to think that the British are doing a good thing here. Is your perception that the IRA was fighting a good fight?
Not necessarily. I think this is where these kind of situations, like, it's perspective is everything for people's point of view. And as you said, I don't know that there's any like good decisions being made. I think it's very easy to fight against what the IRA were doing. I also think the British Army and did so much over 800 years.
Sure.
To attack the Irish constantly. And even at that stage, were putting people in prison knowing that they weren't guilty. Like they were
I-
setting people up. They were still after the Irish. What are the Irish? Are you just supposed to lay down and take it? No. Like they had to stand up, and I think that's what the IRA were doing. And I think it was just such a contentious time in Irish history. I don't know that. I don't think anyone was making the best decisions they've ever made. But I think the IRA were fighting for what they believed, and I think the British were fighting for what they believed was like kind of rightfully theirs.
Okay.
I don't think it was a fair fight, and I think they were using civilians were the ones, as is in most conflicts, civilians were the ones who lost out most.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to talking more about this and
Are
learning
you?
more about this. I am.
Are you a little bit scared?
No, I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's a topic that I feel like I don't know a lot about, and so it'll be good to learn about it. But it's also, I mean, another way of looking at this is a story about a double agent, which is innately an interesting story. So
Yeah, actually, on that note, it's kind of similar, and I wonder how similar-ish to our Russian spy double agent. What was that one called? The one that was like erotica. What was it called?
To Die For.
To Die For. Yeah, I wonder will there be any similarities? Like so far, there's been none. Mark Horgan has not sounded like a sleazy guy trying to bed the person that is bearing all her deepest, darkest secrets. But we shall see. Maybe things will change as we move off episode 1.
We heard about Sylvia Jones putting her cat out. We didn't hear about anyone bringing a bottle of wine over.
That's what happens when you get old. You become a crazy cat lady. I thought that was very funny. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to leave us a comment on our Instagram, on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. Please rate us. Give us the 5 stars, guys. We're trying our best here, and we are hopefully entertaining you along the way. And don't forget, tell a friend, tell your neighbour, tell the moms that drop off, tell the dads that pick up. Just tell them all. Thanks so much for listening.
Next time, we're going to discuss all of Stakeknife.
Who was Freddie Scappaticci, and how did he live this double life?
And what about the British military? What's their role in this violent story?
That's on the next So Much Crime,
So Little Time. So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.